Hello and welcome to another one of my videos. Today I will be telling you about the symbolism and meaning of the Eight of Cups in the Thoth deck. As usual, I will start with a description of the card and then we will dive deeper into the symbolism of all of the elements that we can see here. I will list the meanings of this card in Divination at the end of the video, so the timestamp for when I start talking about that is shown below now, so you can jump there if you want. The first look at the Eight of Cups tells us that this is not going to be a very positive card. It's overall very dark. The dominant color here is dark green, and we see that the cups are broken in places. There is hardly any water flowing into them. The flowers are not looking very healthy either, and the stems of the flowers are looking quite thin and feeble. In the Book of Thoth, Crowley describes this card in the following way. Water appears no longer as the sea, but as pools, and there is no fluorescence in this card as there was in the last. The lotuses droop for lack of sun and rain, and the soil is poison to them. Only two of the stems show blossoms at all. The cups are shallow, old and broken. The background of the card shows pools or lagoons in very extensive country, incapable of cultivation. Only disease and miasmatic poison can flourish in those vast bad lands. So our sea has turned into pools or lagoons, and we can see that the bottom of the card looks very muddy here. The fluorescence that Crowley mentions in this quote is the process of flowering, or in general, it means a process of developing richly and fully, like, for example, the fluorescence of poetry or music. We can see that Crowley links this card to the previous one in this suit, and we will see more connections between them in a moment, but now let's just notice that it looks like the 8 is what happens after we were unable to resolve the issues in the 7. So in the 7, we still had some joy, even if it was just like some perceived empty pleasure, but here in the 8, there can be no joy at all. Crowley tells us that there is no sun or rain here, and the soil is poison, so we only have these two very unhealthy looking flowers in this card, and their stems look very thin, and they look a bit like ribbons here. We have two flowers, so we need to consider the symbolism of number 2 and what it means here. So number 2 is associated with both partnership and opposition, and it was considered as an unlucky number by Pythagoreans because it creates a division from 1. So it starts the duality of good and evil, and therefore it can be seen as creating evil by splitting the divine oneness into two polar opposites. The badlands mentioned in the quote are a type of terrain where there is a lot of water erosion, and this creates a stark landscape with very little vegetation, and it's impossible to farm these areas. And that's why Crowley tells us that only disease and miasmatic poison can flourish in these places. Miasma is a foul-smelling vapor arising from rotting organic matter. So again, in this card, as in the previous one, we have this idea of disease and decay. And let's have a closer look at the cups now. Apart from being shallow and broken, they look like they have no basis. They are standing either on leaves or in the pools of water on the ground, but they look like they could be knocked over very easily. And it looks like they are made out of copper, which would give us another link to the previous cards, to the 7, because copper is the metal of Venus, and we had a lot of Venusian energy in the 7 of Cups. We have 5 pools in the bottom part of this card that the cups stand in, and 5 is a number of Gevura, the Sephira, connected with major arcana card Tower. And we can see this influence repeated again in the 5 stems of lotus flowers. A tower brings us unexpected destruction. We are being forced into a new reality because we were not able to follow the need for change in our lives. So, whenever we resist change and whenever we get stuck in some unhealthy place in our lives, we are subconsciously inviting this destructive force to break the unhealthy pattern for us. And because Eight of Cups is associated with inaction and stagnation, the destructive power of Five starts to loom over us here. If we count the small water pools in the bottom of the card, we will get 21. 21 as a Fibonacci number is a sum of 8 and 13. So 8, of course, is connected to the 8 Sephira Hod, and we will be talking about this in just a moment. But 13 connects this card to the Death card, the 13th card of the Major Arcana. And Death is another card that shows us a great change, a transformation where something old must die so new can be born. And it shows us that we need to leave some experiences behind us so that new energy can flow into our lives. But of course, in order to do that, we need to face what is painful, and any emotions or difficult truths must be acknowledged first before we can deal with them and then finally leave them behind. Let's hear another quote now that will let us fully compare the 8 and the 7 of Cups. The water is dark and muddy. On the horizon is a pallid, yellowish light, weighed down by leaden clouds of indigo. Compared with the last card, it represents the opposite and complementary error. The one is the Garden of Kundry, the other the Palace of Klingsor. Garden of Kundry and Palace of Klingsor are both places from the opera Parsifal by Richard Wagner. Kundry is a woman enslaved by Klingsor, the magician, and she is cursed forever for not showing compassion because she laughed at Christ's pain on the cross. The garden is a place of seduction where both Kundry and the flower maidens try to seduce Parsifal, and they try to lead him astray from the path of seeking the Holy Grail. And we can see a similarity here with the Seven of Cups, where simple empty pleasures were taking our attention away from our spiritual path. Klingsor wanted to become one of the knights of the Grail, but he couldn't control his sinful desires, so he then castrated himself in order to become more pure. But this in turn has caused him to be banned from the order. And he became the magician in order to oppose the knights who rejected him. So he creates this garden with beautiful flower maidens who would seduce knights and prevent them from completing their quests, so preventing them from finding the Holy Grail. And therefore, the Palace of Klingsor shows us symbolically the situation where the magician lives only to spite others for rejecting him, and he is incapable of any true creation and can only bring to life these empty promises of pleasure in the form of the flower maidens or Kundry, because he controls Kundry as well. And this is the inaction and stagnation of the Eight of Cups, where nothing can grow and all creativity and joy of life has been lost. And this is why the 7 and 8 are said to be the opposite and complementary errors here in this quote. So 7 distracts us with empty pleasure, so in 8 we choose to deny ourselves all pleasure. And this takes us all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum, while we should be living happily in the center, in the middle of it all, in the balance between the two extremes. The next quote will lead us into discussing the astrological attributions of the card. The 8, Hod, in the suit of water, governs this card. It shows the influence of Mercury, but this is overpowered by the reference of the card to Saturn in Pisces. Pisces is calm but stagnant water, and Saturn deadens it completely. On the Tree of Life, we are now in the 8th Sephira of Hod, which is connected to planet Mercury. And Mercury is a very fast-moving planet. It is responsible, among other things, for communication and travel. So it's quite a curious and nervous energy and that loves to sort, analyze, and understand everything. It is not the best fit in the suit of water because it's very often difficult for us to understand and analyze our emotions or intuition. Our intellect is usually thought of as the opposite of emotion, and that's why the Sephira creates very little balance with the element of the suit that we are in. On the decan wheel, we are in the first decan of Pisces, and the time frame associated with this decan is from February 19th until February 28th. Saturn in Pisces is not a very good placement. Saturn loves to restrict, to create boundaries and structures, but Pisces is the home of Jupiter. This is the place where Venus is exalted, so it has a very open energy. And Pisces is a very trusting sign. It lacks boundaries and it doesn't have this discriminating quality. So it can absorb contradictions and it's very adaptive. And it's a sign of mutable water, so it wants to flow freely without being bound or restricted. Now I'm going to tell you a bit about how to interpret this card in divination. So the name of the card is indolence, and this is associated with a lack of effort, with stagnation, and we can even say that it's laziness. And this card shows us really the situation where we can't see the point of continuing what we were doing. And maybe even we can't see the point in our life anymore. So there is no creativity here, and all effort has been abandoned. In work-related readings, this can mean feeling unfulfilled, and maybe we feel that our work has no meaning anymore. We can't see the point of continuing on the path that we are on. And maybe we are also disenchanted with the career that we chose, and we thought that it's going to bring us pleasure and joy, but after a few years, we just can't imagine ourselves continuing this any longer. In relationships, the Eight of Cups shows a complete lack of emotional involvement. So we have abandoned our feelings and we have no interest in making an effort anymore. In spirituality, this card shows the lack of energy flow and stagnation. It can show us that we are veering off our spiritual path. If Eight of Cups shows in your reading as a person, then this is someone who's not able to be invested emotionally at the moment, and this person is definitely going through some very difficult time in their lives and has a very pessimistic outlook at this moment. As advice, this card will show you that maybe sometimes it's good to do absolutely nothing. Don't get invested into this matter, whatever it is you're trying to pursue, don't get involved. Sometimes being bored and actually doing nothing can invite great new ideas to pop into our heads. So, if you are feeling like nothing makes sense anymore and you don't care what happens, if you're feeling lazy and you don't want to put effort into anything, maybe just try to allow yourself to feel this for a while. And, don't try to distract yourself, but instead just stay bored, stay in this feeling for a while longer, and then see what happens, see what new ideas will come to you. If this card shows up in your reading as an obstacle, then this will mean that you're not making enough effort and you need to be more engaged in this matter to get the results that you want. And if you can't bring yourself to be interested in whatever it is you're doing now, maybe it's just time to think about changing something. Maybe you should set some new goals, just completely reevaluate what you were doing and what you want to do in the future. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and please remember to like the video and, of course, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I would like to thank everyone who is already supporting the channel. I appreciate your help very, very much. And if you want to help me provide even more great videos explaining Thoth, you can consider a one-time PayPal donation, or you can also become my patron on Patreon. And all of the links are in the video description below. Once again, thank you for today, and I will see you in the next video about the Nine of Cups very soon. Thank you so much. Bye!